I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
Hello. So in part one, we talked about malignant narcissism in politics, right? So how power concentrates around personalities that demand loyalty, dominance, and spectacle, really. Haven't we seen a lot of spectacle lately? In part two, we looked at religion and how control becomes sanctified, how authority becomes divine, and how obedience becomes moralized, even in education, right? Today, we're going to look at the third pillar, which is money. So, because When malignant narcissism can't dominate through politics alone, and when sanctified religion isn't enough, wealth becomes that third ultimate authority: moral authority, cultural authority, psychological authority. Think about a stool. You have to have three legs for it to stand. These are the three pillars of control. Before we get into it, let me say hi to some folks. Auntie is here first. Hi with the peace sign, my favorite Auntie. Armando is here. Peace to you as well. Leon's here. What's up? Adrian is here. He says, let's go. And reminding everybody to hit the like button on the way in. This is the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. So if you're watching from the clouds, please feel free to come in and make a comment. You will be welcomed as long as you're appropriate. And also shout out to the replay gang. So let's get into it, okay? What we're going to talk about tonight is what happens when wealth concentration becomes so extreme that the money itself starts functioning like a sacred object. We've heard of this before. I'm not going to get into, how is the Fed made and who exactly are the families, and all of that could take an all-day show, which might be fun, actually. But we're going to look more outside looking in. How does this narcissistic control work on the people? Because people who have it are worshipped like demigods. Look at Elon Musk. In this system that we are in, wealth equals virtue and poverty equals failure, which is so crazy. Leon says, commodification of your reality. Yes, absolutely. So we don't have to speculate that wealth shaped our society. That is part of our documented history. It wasn't a bunch of poor folks who were the founding fathers. And then, moving forward, we had industrial era philanthropists, including J.D. Rockefeller, right? Good old John Rockefeller. He invested heavily in education initiatives in the early 20th century. Why would he do that? Through organizations like the General Education Board, enormous resources went into shaping how education functioned in an industrialized nation. He is famously quoted as, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And something I've noticed in the last couple of years, there was this, you could look up that quote and it would come right up. Then it started becoming like, you would have some websites saying, well, that hasn't been confirmed that he said that. And now when you look it up, it says, well, that's probably a conspiracy theory. But it is attributed to him, and it has been for years and years and years. Something in the last couple of years, they changed the narrative. But if somebody wants a nation of thinkers, or does not want a nation of thinkers and wants only a nation of workers, then we don't have to teach critical thinking. We don't have to teach discourse. We don't have to understand cognitive dissonance. It's a teaching style of I speak, you listen, and then you do the test to make sure that when I speak, you listen. It is solely based on obedience. Funnily enough, I think this is why when they do studies on our modern education system, it shows that little girls respond better to this teaching style. Little girls tend to be a bit more submissive, but they like this teaching style of just sitting and listening and looking at pictures and stories and movies, whereas boys are more kinetic. They want to physically move. They want to be given don't show me a picture of the thing, hand me the thing. And then, let me work with it. Let me do it. Let me run the science experiment. Okay. Our modern system does not work for boys very well. So our focus has leaned more towards practical skills like efficiency, so agricultural training, industrial readiness, preparing people to be good citizens, right? For participation in the economic machine. But for Black people, boys especially, decisions have to be made early for which pipeline to plug the person into. Now, whether you interpret that as modernization or economic conditioning depends on your perspective. But one thing is undeniable about this system: wealth has shaped all of America's, all of the West's institutions since they began. And those institutions get to shape everything else. Auntie says different timeline. Yeah, we changed timelines. Maybe that's why in this timeline they don't allow the quote. And Adrian says, or needing to understand nuance, right? Because it's I speak, you listen, and then you regurgitate back to me on the test what I said. So we don't have to understand the gray. We don't have to understand anything. You only listen to what I say, even if you know what I'm saying is wrong. It is considered disobedient to correct your teacher. So then is it about learning and about truth? Absolutely not. So education systems tend to reflect the economic priorities of the time. So industrial economies need reliable workers. They need a lot of drones. They need a lot of worker bees in industrial economies. Information economies need adaptable thinkers. So in America, our adaptable thinkers are in the upper caste system, those upper caste kids who are funneled into academia. Whether they're smart or not, doesn't matter. But those are the more high-paying jobs. So we funnel the upper caste system into those thinking jobs, where there's, what do they call them? The brainstorming groups, people who get paid to brainstorm, to think. I would love that job. Leon says, my woman professor from Germany tried, and she was shut down by the community college I went to. She wanted us to do labs first, then the second hour read over the book in Anatomy and Physiology 1. I think I would want to read the book first. Like I would want to know the stuff before I tried the experiment. Oh, think tanks. Thank you. Think tanks. Thank you, Adrian. That's what I was talking about. So Rockefeller financially supported and had a hand in making the texts. Heck, up until the 1900s, maybe even the 1980s, depends on which one you read, our medical texts still said that Black people have a stronger pain tolerance. So Black people today are still being accused of med seeking when they're in pain. Because how many doctors today were in training prior to the change? And then you've got the professors who learned it that whole other way. Money and wealth still make the textbooks. I used to be on the school board. I know this intimately. Our education system emphasizes compliance over curiosity. You have to obey. Your curiosity gets you put in after-school suspension. In fact, curiosity and questioning are always explicitly discouraged. It's never been about learning. Being efficient is more important than critical thinking. And the way to be efficient is I'll tell you what you think, and then you say the words that I told you to say. That's why we have all these people today who just keep regurgitating and repeating all the same talking points over and over again. Even when you debunk what they said, they'll just say it again, or they'll just move on to another talking point, move the goalpost, whatever. Efficiency, right, is about what you produce, and how you test is how you're graded. That's your production. So no time for exploration at all. And it makes me question if we are educating citizens or if we're staffing the predator class's investments. Because I'm starting to think we're just staffing the predator class's investments. I'm going to be calling the elites the predator class more and more. I just started doing that. So, in my notes, the elites are probably there, but they are not elite. They're predators. So I'm going to call them what they are. All right. So something interesting happened culturally over the last century. Money stopped being just this medium of exchange, kind of a replacement for barter, they always say, although it never was. Money became a moral signature. Weirdly. Don't get me wrong, money in the West has always been the means of control and has been an outward signal of worth or importance. Always. But in modern times, wealth started to imply things. Wealth implied intelligence. It implied being virtuous, even divine favor for the Christians. Wealth implies God loves you more than others. The rich get to have their blessings on this earth. Remember, we just talked about that. But you get yours after you die. And if you don't get it, it doesn't matter. You can't tell anybody you're dead. So prosperity theology didn't emerge out of nowhere. It mirrors the broader cultural belief. If you're rich, you deserve to be rich. That's not true. And if you're poor, you deserve to be poor because you failed. That's not true either. That belief is really psychologically convenient because it absolves systems of responsibility. We're back to, if something is wrong, it is your fault. Why did you make me abuse you? Narcissism, right? It mirrors the way the church works, right? The church does it the same way. Anything good is because of God. Anything good that you get is because of capitalism, right? But anything bad in the church is your fault. And anything bad in this economic system is because you're a failure, right? It's all because of you. Does this sound narcissistic yet? So now, more than ever, wealth is sacred. Inequality is just this natural formation that somehow happened because there are the chosen and the blessed, and then there are the not chosen and the not blessed. Exploitation is just efficiency. God gave you these things, and people are allowed to take it from you, right? Because God gave it to you. Power looks like it was earned, even when it wasn't, which I know is hard for some people to accept because this is part of our indoctrination. But this caste system is entrenched, and being on the bottom is a birthright as much as being on the top. That's why I refer to it as a caste system. There are so many studies out there that show as soon as someone becomes homeless, as soon as they are unhoused, there are so many things put in that person's way to make it to where they can't get out of homelessness, because that's how the system works. So you know that the opposite is true. If someone is in these upper crust predator class families and they're born into that system and they're born at a certain level, they get to that level, then there's all of these things put in place to keep them from falling as well, because that's how it works. Our American money is sanctified, and the markets are the temples. Leon says, yes, they only want you to critically think when you come up against an error within the field you work. but never outside of the error in front of you at work. Well, and especially, it definitely has to be within the field when, when you're doing your work, because I'm thinking if there's a policy or a process or something, you can't critically think about that because they made the policies. And it's even hard to convince other people that it's anytime's a good time to update a policy. I tend to update policies, once a year. And I know of a lot of businesses that 10 years, 20 years, 30 years has been the same policy. And people are like, well, that's just the way we've always done it. I try to avoid that as much as possible, because racism is just the way America's always done it. Probably time to update those policies. All right. So let's think about this from a psychological play, though. Okay. Narcissism. Throughout history, provision and trust with money has been tied to identity, especially white masculine identity. I'm going to say it again. Throughout history, provision and trust with money has been tied to identity, especially white masculine identity. So being able to provide meant status, stability, safety, desirability. In our modern hyper-capitalist culture, the signal is amplified even greater. So wealth is security, sure, because you can pay your bills. You're not going to get unhoused if you're wealthy, right? They're not going to repo your car if you're wealthy. So there's some security there. But it's also your identity, right? A billionaire. Listen, think about when we talk about people. Billionaire, Bill Gates. Billionaire, Elon Musk. It's like saying Mr. Billionaire, CEO, millionaire. All these words get added to your name, and every time you're mentioned, it's said. Like, we're never allowed to forget it. Just you wait until Musk becomes a trillionaire, which he almost is. And then every time you hear his name, trillionaire, Elon Musk, because it's part of their identity. It's an outward marker of their dominance, of their worth, of their potency, their virility. It becomes the big, girthy, swinging balls of a wealthy man, like the nuts that hang off the back of a souped-up pickup truck. That's what wealth does for them. And when identity fuses with wealth, criticism of an economic system starts to feel like criticism of the self. If we start to ask questions about the economic system, then we are essentially being seen as attacking the ultra wealthy. This is where another area where the attack on white people comes from. That wealth inequality is there for a reason. It's where narcissistic dynamics run unchecked in the economic system, not just in individuals alone, which it's definitely there. I am of the opinion that every billionaire has narcissistic tendencies. Nobody has been able to prove me wrong yet. And then think about if you're a trillionaire, holy God. But also in the cultures organized around money, just like ours, right? It's a culture, it's a system. One thing that often gets forgotten about when we talk about wealth in America is that money was sanctified from the beginning. If you want a stark example, because this is 400 years, let's talk about slavery and how we have treated Black people, because that's all about wealth. Enslaved human beings were not simply trafficked individuals who were kidnapped, beaten, and abused to be free labor. Not just, can you imagine? That's bad enough. But they were also capital assets. Did you know that you could take out a loan and use your enslaved population as collateral on your loan? These are investments. People were bought, sold, leveraged, insured because then if one of them died, you could get paid, and also inherited, like money and the fine china and the good silver. Insurance companies wrote policies on enslaved bodies. Entire regional economies depended on the commodification of Black bodies, not just their labor. The millions upon millions upon millions and billions of dollars that Black people's labor produced, there's even more money on the flip side. When you hear people say that Black people were treated like they were property, that's false. They were property. What is psychologically significant is how it was morally justified. Slaveholders were often framed and saw themselves as respectable, civilized, successful, even righteous, Christian men and women of God. Wealth functioned as the moral validation for any of their behavior. If the Pope says we can do it, then we can do it. If you were prosperous in any way, you must be blessed. And if you were enslaved, well, then that's the natural order of things, because poverty means failure. So what does it matter? Imagine what it means if you're enslaved. Leon says, yep. If you were enslaved, your suffering was framed as natural, deserved, divinely ordered, like the curse of Ham, which ends up being completely false from what they said. We've talked about that and proven it to be wrong. Profit equals legitimacy every single time. Wealth is not treated as a proof of virtue. Wealth is treated as a proof of virtue even today. Exploitation then becomes easier to ignore. So look at the Epstein files and how the predator class is being exposed. I'm not calling them elites. Like I said, they're not elite. They're not better. They're predators. Okay. The dynamic didn't disappear when slavery ended. It just evolved. It morphs and changes its name. That's what it always does. It becomes sharecropping and convict leasing and wage suppression and redlining and the prison industrial complex and the wealth gaps that persist today. It's different mechanisms with the same psychological foundation and the same getting other people rich. It's like I have to make some people less than human in my mind, less than chosen, less than me, to pre-validate my maltreatment of them, because they can't handle the cognitive dissonance. So money equals worth. And those without it must somehow deserve their position, because once wealth becomes moralized, inequality is normalized. The gaslighting legitimized itself. We change reality to make ourselves innocent, moral, righteous, and deserving of all the wealth that we exploit from other people and other countries. Leon says, if you do not own property, you are a slave by definition. So one of the biggest myths in modern economics is perfectly equal competition. That is not how it is in the West, and it never has been. It is a myth. The American dream, and everybody's got a chance and everybody can make it. New York, that is a myth. That is not how capital or capitalism works. Because wealth generates opportunity. Wealth generates better education, better networks, lower risk tolerance, access to more capital, influence over regulations. So wealth begets wealth. If you start 10 steps ahead, Staying ahead does not require any sort of genius at all, because the system is set up to keep you there. You just rely on the system. You could be a complete dolt, and there are complete idiots in the predator class. It doesn't even require you to be talented in any way. Your money buys the brokers, buys the bankers, buys the keepers, buys your handlers. So you can be just as dumb and mean as you want to be while calling yourself a man of God, righteous and moral and blessed. Jeez. It reinforces the narrative that wealth equals superiority. This is where we get into the white supremacy. We made ourselves rich, then we sanctified our wealth, so we're better. That's exactly how it works. This is why they control education. They burn books. They control the narrative. Because if you knew the truth, then their wealth is at risk. And they may have to actually compete, God forbid, and they know that they are not skilled enough to make it. So they have to live and die on the hill of never letting the system change. So let's talk public assistance, because that's one of the narratives, right? Public assistance gets talked about almost exclusively in terms of poverty. Welfare programs and the welfare queens, social safety nets and the poor white family in the trailer park, immigration debates and the immigrants sucking our resources dry, nefariously, of course, while also voting 14 times and stealing your dogs somehow. However, enormous financial support flows upward and always has. Corporate tax incentives in the millions, bailouts in the billions, infrastructure subsidies in the millions, favorable capital gains taxation in the millions. Do you know Elon Musk only pays like 4.8% tax rate? And then we don't have money to do other stuff. What's our tax rate? Like 25%? Isn't it something like that? 25%? We're paying like a quarter of our money to taxes and Social Security. And this man who's getting ready to be a trillionaire only pays like 4.8. Their support, the predator class, they're sucking the teat off of government assistance too. And it's much less visible. You have to go searching for these things. But because it's wealthy folks, they must deserve the handouts. Because again, wealth equals intelligence. Wealth equals they deserve it. Wealth equals they're good. And the poor people? Well, they deserve God's punishment anyway, so let them suffer. That's just the belief. That's the belief system. Leon says, I know Black women who work and get $52.38 of food stamps for the month. Like, Elon Musk pays 4.8% taxes, and we're worried about $52.38. And I realize, we may be talking about a bunch of people, but are you 1 month of taxes at the appropriate tax rate for Elon Musk, we could pay for SNAP benefits for everyone. Wild. But no, we have to be worried about the mom who's got food stamps and the poor white family, that's got their Social Security nets, and the immigrants voting a bunch. Leon says Elon Musk doesn't pay tax because the government already gives him $500 million to $2 billion a year. Well, there's that. So whatever little tax he pays, he's getting it back. He is drawing it dry. So This is millions upon millions upon millions upon billions of dollars that flow upward to the already wealthy. The narrative is poor people are dependent upon the system. Wealthy institutions are successful, even when both are receiving public support, the wealthy much more than anybody else, and the middle class gets none of it. We don't get any of it. We're the sink or swims. But then everybody's got to blame the people on government assistance below them instead of the wealthy people sucking from the teat ahead of them. Whew, that's a soapbox for me. Wealth concentration has increased significantly in many developed economies. Reagan got rid of some of those safety nets because, the rich wanted to get richer. A small percentage of people hold a very large share of assets, but public frustration rarely targets that concentration directly. We blame the single mom, the people at the food pantry, free school lunches. Oh, God forbid, free school lunches. Again, 1 month of taxes from Elon could pay for free school lunches for the entire nation. We blame the homeless and the immigrants. We're told to blame them with their little SNAP benefits, acting like they're lazy and they're doing nothing. But Elon's tax breaks, millions per month. And that's just him, by the way. There are many of them that get those same tax breaks. And that's classic scapegoating psychology. That scapegoating is narcissism, right? And that thought is actually completely false. So it's also gaslighting. There are more than enough resources in this world. There is more than enough housing in this nation, and more than enough food, more than enough land, more than enough money to go around for all of us. But somehow the anger flows downward. We are deeply conditioned to equate money with value. Success equals wealth. Worth equals productivity. And poverty equals failure. And that is just way too simplistic and only works for the narcissistic predator class. It never takes into account opportunity differences, historical inequalities, market fluctuations, policy decisions, all the things that keep them up at the top and others down at the bottom. They made those laws and put those things in place. So obviously they don't want to take them into account. When poverty is framed purely as a personal failure, structural analysis disappears. We don't have to look into it. You're poor because you suck. That's the rhetoric. So here's the thread across the entire Malignant Narcissist series. Okay. Politics enforces loyalty. Religion sanctifies obedience. And then money moralizes the hierarchy that we live in, the caste system. So it's all control and authority without any type of accountability whatsoever. We, not just my live tribe, because, we were already there, but a lot of people are waking up to the predator class. A lot of more people are talking about the elites. And a lot more people are looking into the financial system. They're looking into the Fed. They're looking into rollbacks of things that should keep the predator class under control. More people are waking up to that, and that's a positive thing. We see what wealth, specifically Western, white, Jewish, Christian wealth does. Nefarious things across the whole globe. We see the complete and utter degradation of others, the lack of empathy, the lack of accountability, the evil and torturous behaviors, stealing, lying, murdering, raping. And all this Western culture must protect it because, as U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi allegedly said, if we prosecute everyone in the Epstein files, the whole system collapses. And also the Dow is at 50,000. So I say let it collapse. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate you guys being here for this series. Coming up this Wednesday, show's going to be at 7 o'clock. So Sunday and Wednesday are both going to be at 7 o'clock from now on. This coming Wednesday, because, you know, JJ Hertalk is a doo-doo head. We're done with JJ Hertalk. We're not even going to finish the book. It'll eventually be over on Patreon. So we're going to have part 1 of 4 going over Muammar al-Gaddafi's Green Book. This. So it's broken up into 3 sections, but I got so deep looking into who are the players here that this first episode, this part 1, it's going to be deep and wild and such a rabbit hole. It's going to be amazing. So we'll have that on Wednesday. Hopefully you guys will be there. And then the following Sunday, we're going to look at my theory on the Anglo suppression of seasonings. And I realize it sounds funny and the thumbnail is funny, but this is an actual historical theory that I have that we're going to go over. It's not just the jokey, you know, white people don't season their food thing. If you watch the show, you'll actually know why, which is going to be so cool. So if I don't see you on Wednesday, I hope to see you next Sunday. Armando says the new time works great for him. Adrian says, let's go. All right. I see you guys later, and I'm going to show you a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not soteric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. Let's uncover the universe together.